All right, here we go again. This is a topic that I'll discuss briefly to help understand what's going on there in FBI. So one thing you should understand: the FBI is a very competitive recruitment agency, which means they had people with like master's degrees and maybe even some doctor's degrees applying for agent positions at the ground floor just because they wanted to be in the FBI. When you're not having that college degree, they're not going to generally hire somebody that was a infantry, even lieutenant for 3 years just because 4 years because they were in the military, right? Because you're going to get people that were special operations, that did 15, 20 years in the military, maybe even get 10 years. In other words, if they can't make it to the FBI, they're probably not going to leave or to a police department, But then when you go to the police department, you have to start from scratch, right? So if they go to the FBI, these guys and gals that have had experience in special operations for maybe a decade or more, they'll go because they're going to have a pretty good career from where they are. You also have these detectives, and they're on our task forces. And in Baltimore, we had some people that had minor experience in DC, were motivated, but they had minor experience in fugitive operations in DC. And then they had the chief that selected me had selected them because he knew that they had been tried and true in DC Super Court, and he was bolstering the office. Again, there was a large number of people from that had worked in DC. But when the fugitive task force expanded, or even when it was there smaller, at that point there was very little senior experience. But what we had is we had two detective sergeants, one from Harford County and one from Baltimore City on the task force, and they had 10, 20 years experience. So you see, you had all these guys that all they had to do was follow what they say, and they look great, and eventually again learned the craft, right? The fugitive craft, fugitive operations craft. Right. So, but again, they have pretty good pay, and they don't work for their department. So the departments are not losing them per se just because we hire them away. These guys and gals that were on the Monster Service task force, they stay forever, right, until they retire sometimes, if not all the time. So there's just, again, we'll have augmentees from the police department. Yeah, and it goes both ways because then they're like liaisons. We did the homicide warrants from Baltimore City, right, maybe even some of the other places. Right. So again, we were clearing the city homicide warrants, and we had back then. I mean, now it's probably more propagated, but back then we could call headquarters, and they could do some of that ESU stuff to help us out. So again, it was a benefit both the cities and the towns and us. Again, I don't know. Harford County isn't really or wasn't known for homicides, but one of their detectives cleared more city homicide warrants than probably anybody in the history of the world. The Baltimore City would always ask us, and we'd do it. Right. That was a strange one because he was although he wasn't 24/7. He wasn't 24/7. The Baltimore City guy was a little bit more 24/7 because he didn't have to go back to Harford County and do any work. Although we did some of their work, also. Right. But he would always help on the Baltimore City homicide warrants, or generally. Right. But the weird part is his name was George Cunningham. Oh, I can't say this part. Forget it, because he might still be working. All right, it'll be doxing, I guess. Now George Cunningham is either dead or old enough that it doesn't matter. He might actually own a business. Who knows? They go into the bail bonds business a little bit there when they do retire. Right. So it just doesn't make any sense that we don't hire that type of person. Now I don't think they had college degrees. They could have, but I don't think they did. So when you get to a police department, you have somebody that maybe was just a rookie, and was thinking maybe later I'll go to college, and just never got to it because they were just I guess for lack of a better term, shit hot, and they could just do everything like I could and can, and they just promote them like a normal agency would promote them and protect them. Right. And they just never get to it. But they're a detective sergeant, and they've cleared thousands and thousands of cases on the FBI task force, or on the uh, Marshal Service task force, or maybe even HSI if it has some task forces there. So right, they've worked those cases, and uh, FBI has a fugitive, or used to, I guess they still do, unlawful flight to avoid prosecution is a big part of what they do. I don't know how they do it now, because it kind of was a redundant overlap. And we would put people on the FBI task force. So I don't know if they ever straightened that weirdness out. But again, it doesn't matter, I guess. The more the merrier. So there's no reason to worry about that, because you're not going to just get a basic person in there. Their experience, only because the competition is going to be so tight. You're going to have people that have combat experience, right? Maybe even there's a guy that's a sergeant on Delta Force or something like that, and he puts in for the FBI, right? So, and that's what they're looking to do. Again, it used to be done generally through these augmentees and task forces and stuff like that, but there's no reason not to hire them. And again, that's not everything the FBI is designed to be. You still need people who can think through things. The only problem I have with colleges, it appears that some people are recruited into deep state mindset in colleges, right? The operators are around colleges looking for certain people. Again, Elon did it with people. I think he pulled them out of college, or met them or realized them when they were in college. I don't know when Bill Big Balls came along, but that's the kind of thing they do, and then they turn them into deep state flunkies. Thanks, sir. So again, that's college isn't always the best place to find people, especially if they've been compromised by some sort of system of compromised allegiance. And again, I'm not this guy that believes that you are allegiant. This is what's going to get all of you. You have this allegiance to Trump thing, and you can't fire people because you believe they're disloyal to Trump, and that's where this is going. I also told you, black women always have a way to sue you. Right. I told you I couldn't sue because I was a white male. Now it's a little bit better today, but black women can always sue you, and I don't know what the case is, but you're probably going to have some pushback here shortly. Right. But the idea that getting, she may have had an issue. I don't know. You may have had to do it. I don't know. But the idea that, so it's bigger than this one. I was just looking at my tofu packages. Actually, that is the same. I guess I don't have the other type. But I was wondering if this other one, they're both 16 ounces, but I was wondering if the other one was bigger. there's, again, I can't speak to any discrimination, but it's just right. You had a habit of just canning people, right? And you made statements about DEI. That I told you those are horrific statements. Well, it's almost like you're calling them the N word. Like if you say somebody's a DEI hire because they're a person of color, you've actually committed a hate crime. Or I guess at that point not hate crime. But if you fire somebody because you say that they're DEI because they're a person of color, well, there's no fact there. It's racism, right? Well, like I'm telling you, everything's going to come over time. I've told you that from the first day you were in office, or even before. In November, I started telling you that you have to be careful because you'll be set up, and over time, you develop a pattern of practice that they can ding you on. Right? Well, the one judge that's a foreigner, she did the right thing. That's the law. Now, she might be a willing participant in that form of protection where you believe that she shouldn't be. And again, we're talking about kids, but if their parents are identified, not all of them, I understand, are identified in Guatemala, but maybe they are. If their parents are identified in Guatemala, they need to go. I mean, it doesn't make sense. And I don't think the spirit of the law was, unaccompanied kids that have parents in Guatemala should stay here. I don't, in foster care at the American expense, at the government expense. So again, the law, I didn't look at the law, but the law might be too vague, which would really destroy the law. You'd have to pass a law to protect those children from deportation. Again, I wouldn't do it the way the Trump administration is doing it, because there's certain cases of deportation probably shouldn't be happening based upon just a higher ethic. However, some of those children, if you find their parent in Guatemala, it's right. There is no real amnesty. Like, they don't even have to meet an amnesty standard. They should have to meet the amnesty standard, right? I send my kid up there, for the government to raise my kid, the government in the United States. That makes sense, right? So you can fight the law based upon, I have to read the law, I guess, but based upon it being too vague. I mean, somebody just comes up here and the government takes over their life and as a kid and raises them. Right? If their parents are in Mexico or in Guatemala or in Honduras, and we identify those parents and there's no amnesty case that has been approved, then they have to go back, just like everyone else. But again, I think it was designed to make sure we don't harm them. Again, I would be concerned at what the administration has been producing in that regard. Right. Well, I think we can be a little bit more careful. Again, we're backed up. We're not sitting there like we need people to deport. I mean, we do, but we don't. Right? We can slow it down a little bit and kind of have a little more discernment in what we're doing, instead of bombastically throwing bodies at the flights. Because we don't have detention centers, right? We don't have detention space. That means we're doing okay. I mean, we need to keep going, but right. So in some cases, they were babies. Somebody carried a baby across the border and said, "I'm not with that baby." Right. Thanks, Larry. No parent paid for their child to be taken to the United States. Now, we don't know if the child was raped or not. But and again, that's one of the goals of that particular system, is to protect the children from something like that happening. All right. Again, both administrations go in the opposite directions too far. But it doesn't mean that we shut down and don't help the government. I think that's what they're hoping, the enemies of the United States, to happen. I'd be discerning things a little bit more. And again, I don't know the evidence against Abrego Garcia. Well, look, we HSI, was it an HSI case or was it an FBI case? I can't remember. We know we had large numbers of people that know the scam, how to get a green card by helping the government. Now, I'm a big fan of that, but again, there's corruption in it, so we need to police it, right? So, again, if I say something you want to hear about Abrego Garcia, I'm going to be somebody. I'm going to be an American with a green, or not an immigrant, but an immigrant with a green card. So again, I don't know. I don't know the evidence. If you don't have physical evidence as far as speaking out from a podium about the man versus, yeah, well, because the government, what you all think is that the government's the same as the private sector. It's not. You can't just say stuff. The freedom of speech does not exist within the government as far as a government entity revealing facts about a private citizen outside of a courtroom setting. Right. And I was just cursed. I have to take care of something here. Okay. Thanks, Larry. Little boo boo. They'll have a big boo boo. God will take care of it for me. Thanks, Larry. Well, it doesn't make any sense that we would just have this blanket protection for children where their parents exist in another country and there's no documented. They should, in other words, they should be protected until the adjudication of an amnesty claim. If we find their parents and their parents don't even have to accept the child back, to tell you the truth. Right. But again, it's a way to game the system, and we know that. Right. Well, the argument is that the law is too, because again, the administration has lost, way also, every administration based upon creating laws that were too vague, too broad. Right. I believe some of this stuff with the trans people was too broad, but the court bought into it, and that's that. But thank you, Mary. Well, the law essentially doesn't allow the government any leeway. I mean, logically, you should be allowed to return the child to their parents. Well, it's a gaming of the system. I hire somebody to transport, and we don't even know how many kids were killed, raped, right? In that kind of process. They get to the United States, and they're then now wards of the state. That doesn't make any sense. I don't have to raise my kid now. I can go out and party. My kid's going to be raised by the U.S. government. I don't even think, we don't even have that kind of system for American children that are foster children and things like that. It's a state program. You're talking about the U.S. government raising those children for their parents. Agreed. Yeah, I kind of got off topic there. But I guess that is one of our task forces. Right? Yeah, I believe that the law doesn't. It's just too broad. It's just there's no reason. I don't think that the spirit of the law to begin with is just to kind of game the system like that. Right. Well, that's the only way to fight the law. I mean, the law exists and it says what it says, and I believe it says that you can't deport those kids unless they kind of waive that protection, or the parent requests them back. You would have to send them back. But again, at that point, how does a child like that arrive here? Oh, they just happen to kidnap the child and then put them in for the program when they get here. I mean, obviously, that's like a criminal enterprise. Right. Well, because what you're doing is you're encouraging parents to just give their kids to coyotes and criminals, right, and bring them up here. Now, some were older, but still, right. Well, right. There should be a team of people trying to repatriate these kids to where they rightfully belong, where they came from. Right. Now, if there's an amnesty claim made, then let the amnesty claim be made. Right. Thank you, Larry. Now, if you're going to use statistics that in Guatemala, 35% of the children are murdered before they're 18, that's not going to work. Right. That falls under something else, a refugee program. Well, the laws are the laws. The House and the Senate decide who gets the money, and I don't think they're thinking that we should be raising foreign children, unless there's some reason. Again, another immigrant program that somebody just threw cash at, while U.S. citizens are having trouble raising their children. Or our kids, like you're stuck in a state foster system, which is probably a lot worse, right? It's not funded as well. Well, we don't know of any. I mean, when does the government anywhere else take over fostering children? There are no U.S. citizens that the federal government fosters, are there? I don't think so. So it doesn't make any sense, right? And I don't think that was the plan anyway to begin with. The plan was not for this massive foster child program to exist when parents exist. And right, what I think the law should actually do is transfer them to a state foster system if the amnesty is approved. Right. Well, because the government just doesn't do that for U.S. citizens, so I don't know why they're doing that for foreigners. Right. Your kid has trouble, they're not going into the federal government system. They're going to go to college. I mean, they're going to have everything handed to them in those systems. Right. Well, the idea is that our children should be taken care of first because we're here in natural born. It's just the way it works. Now, we agree that you get to come here in a controlled setting. Right. These are not controlled settings. Right. Well, what the parent wants is for the kid to get. It's like their retirement fund. The kid gets educated here. We pay for everything, and then when it comes time, for when they're elderly, the kid can send them money and take care of them. Right. I mean, I've been denied that kind of system. Well, why? Why would we do that to you? Because you're devils on me. Right. I don't even have my kids, and it's not my fault. The Marshal Service employees themselves made sure they fucked that up because somebody paid them to do it. Agree. But if you're not going to protect me, fuck protecting them. I'm not a bad person for saying it. If you're not going to protect me and my family, then fuck them. They come here and they're deep stating us. They're deep stating me. They'd fuck my family for money. Right. They'd screw it up so I couldn't be around my kids for money. Because that's the low-grade people they are. And that's the low-grade people that are in the Marshal Service. That's why they like people like that. That's why they get benefits. So they can be here to be low grade with the federal employees that are so devilish and so criminal that they try to sexualize anybody that the buzz hits their head for, because they learned how to do it earlier on contract hits. Thanks, Larry. Now we have Peter Thiel telling us how to spot the Antichrist. We have a billionaire telling us how to spot the Antichrist. And guess who paid them? People like Peter Thiel. 1%. Kind of makes sense at this point. Thanks, Larry. Thanks, Larry. Now there are okay people in government, but when you're not, you're not. So that whole thing is further corruption of this idea. It is a replacement theory. They're replacing us with people that will be corrupt. But again, conservative use them also. Conservative will say that they're against immigration, like the LDS. The LDS say they're conservative, but they're one of the biggest violators of immigration. Right. Thank you, Larry. And again, all your donors were saying, "What about my employees? What about my employees?" Right. Thank you, Larry. So there is a replacement theory, but it's a little bit deeper. And most, conservatives would agree with the replacement theory in reality. Well, because the initial idea was we'll bring in these third world people and then they'll do our deep state stuff for us. There's conservative deep state everywhere. Who do you think hires immigrants? The deep state, the conservative deep state. Right. Because they're protected from being arrested for doing that. And how do you get protected? You're the deep state. Right. Thanks, Larry. They can't. ICE people can't speak out. We can't tell you what's actually going on when they try to go into a certain neighborhood, or they say let's charge the business owner, and it comes up on the donor list. Right. They can't say anything about that, but that's what's going on. Thanks, Larry. Well, it was an attempt to. That's what it is. Part of it is to bring the deep state in. The idea where they're trying to bring Sharia law, that might be part of it, but the idea is that the deep staters want them there because they'll do what the deep stater tells them. So they can arrest your neighbor based upon the allegation of a deep stater immigrant, right? Or even to psyop them into the condition where they could be arrested. The temperature change is messing with my thermostat. It doesn't, like the other one was a little more. The temperature change didn't affect as much, a little more standardized. More. By the way, well, the walls are cooled, so the same setting doesn't do as well as it did before. IR and a bunch of other stuff. So to cool it, I need a lower setting. But again, on those task forces, we have a ton of other people that are great at what they do. And they may be so busy with life that they don't have a college degree. But they've been to a ton of academies, been out on the street a ton. Like I tell you, some of these people, you're firing everybody, complaining about their leaving earnings statement. Right? They weren't. Where's my boo boo? I don't know where it went. Must have stopped leaking. They don't do 40 hours in the office. Right. They're out there pounding the street. So the LES code was bullshit. Right. Now there are some people that do. Deep state people spend time in the office. Do you see how that would be reversed? Firing the people that spent time on the street versus the people that spent time in the office. So you get an agent that spent 40 hours a week for the last 5 years in the office, and then somebody else, you're like, well, this person hasn't been in the office, but they've been on the street for 80 hours a day. That might be an exaggeration, but right, maybe 60 hours a day. Right. So again, that was a debacle. It needed not to happen. Yeah, you had a bunch of deep state people going, aren't I lucky? I spent 40 hours a day in the office for the last so many years, and now I'm God in Doge world. So again, that's why you don't use people that don't have a clue to cut people. Again, you're still suffering from it. That's obvious. Right. That's part of the FBI issue. Right. Now, the majority of what an agent actually learns is on the street. Right. So again, cutting the training short, yes, no, and different. I don't know. I don't know what they cut. And some of that training could be given at the district or at the office. Right. Right. Some training isn't pass fail. It's simply you kind of just you receive it. All right. And of course, I cut DEI training. That was probably about a week or 2 days. Now, whatever you believe about DEI, you're not allowed to call people DEI hire. That's racist. Well, because you're simply looking at their color or their sexual preference or what's the other thing, whether a woman or not, and saying that they were simply hired because of that. There's no facts there. No, I can attest to the fact that women should have been fired for corruption, but I can't tell you that they weren't capable, right, across the board. Right. No, it's definitely organized crime and racketeering that these women are into. Right. That is really what the deep state is. But because the other or both sides use that organized crime and racketeering, you don't see that on paperwork, right, or being charged. Essentially, because they all commit acts of organized crime and racketeering, frankly, they're not going to charge it, but they'll try to get rid of them a different way because it's like gang warfare. Certain level of anarchy. Well, you've fired some really good people. You're not necessarily going to be able to replace, regardless of who you hire. But I can't tell you who should have been fired and who shouldn't have been fired. Right. But I'm sure the courts will. No, they're just waiting. A lot of people that were in the government, they have money to fall back on, and they have jobs. Like the woman that just left, I'm sure she's going to have a job making similar money, if not better. Right? Especially since she went public like that. Somebody will take care of her. Like Shazak and McCabe, or instant, multimillionaires and shit. Right. Agreed. But they don't have to be, corrupt like that to have the money. No, she might be a deep stater that ordered people, sexualized. I mean, the woman that, the black woman that they let go, she may have actually ordered people to be sexualized. Like one of the women that did it to me, she used her friends, and the inference is that she actually got some of them paid. So like she's in the FBI, and she's got friends in a clique, and she puts them in as kind of like informants to take care of some of her dirty work, right? And some of the agency's dirty work as far as they were concerned, right? And then they paid them as informants. Well, these are people who are lifelong partnerships, and a lot of them rose to the top of the corporate world. The FBI and the CIA made sure they did. But when they were younger, and that's what happens in colleges too. They try to suicide out people. That's where the suicides in the colleges come from. Right. Oh, it's things. It's the beast. What do you expect? It's got tentacles everywhere. I agree. So I'm going to have to build another wristband to use my new things because I can't fit this through the mounting holes. I could kind of undo. I have to drill it. I'm not into drilling it. Oh well. All right. Stay peaceful. Praise God in all that you do. Praise God.